For centuries, the Dalai Lama has been more than a religious leader. He has been a symbol wrapped in layers of myth, philosophy, and living tradition. To some, he is simply a monk who practices compassion. To others, he is a teacher whose wisdom cuts through politics, borders, and ideology. And to millions of Buddhists, he is far more – a Bodhisattva who has chosen not to enter nirvana so he can remain in the world and help humanity awaken. This is the mystery. How can one man carry such different identities at the same time? He dresses in simple robes, yet his presence carries the weight of centuries. He speaks with humility, yet world leaders listen like students at the feet of a master. He laughs like a child, yet his words reveal the discipline of a mind trained through decades of meditation and philosophical debate. Behind the public smiles lies a deeper spiritual narrative, the belief that the Dalai Lama is the reincarnation of Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of infinite compassion. According to Tibetan tradition, he is a soul that returns again and again, not to rule, but to serve, not to conquer, but to teach, not to escape the world, but to guide it. And yet the mystery grows even stranger. He has said he may be the last Dalai Lama, that the lineage might end with him, that titles mean nothing without compassion, that even a bodhisattva must evolve with the world. So who is he, really? A monk who renounced power? A teacher who trusts science as much as spirituality? A global figure whose greatest message is that inner peace is a skill, something anyone can learn? Or a bodhisattva walking the earth disguised as a humble human being? Perhaps the mystery of the Dalai Lama is this: he is not one of these things, but all of them, a reminder that the greatest power is not force or authority, but the capacity to transform the heart.
The story begins in Taksur, a tiny windswept village in northeastern Tibet, a place so small that most of the world would never have known it existed. Mud houses, farmland, and the quiet rhythm of rural life surrounded a boy who had no idea that the world was already looking for him. He was born as Lamo Thondup, the son of simple farmers. His earliest memories were of animals, fields, and the open sky, not monasteries, palaces, or politics. His family was poor, but their home was filled with warmth, laughter, and the traditions of Tibetan village life. What happened next sounds like a legend, yet it is part of real history. When the 13th Dalai Lama passed away, monks set out on a journey across Tibet to find the child who was his reincarnation. They followed visions, dreams, and ancient signs until they reached this remote village and met a young boy who instantly recognized objects belonging to the previous Dalai Lama as if they were his own. A farmer's son was suddenly declared the spiritual leader of an entire nation. In a matter of months, he went from running through fields to being carried into monasteries, from helping his parents with chores to studying philosophy, meditation, and ethics from dawn until night. The boy who once lived in a remote village was transformed into the 14th Dalai Lama, destined to speak to presidents, philosophers, scientists, and millions of followers across the globe. And yet, beneath the robes and titles, he never stopped being that child from Taksur, humble, curious, joyful, and grounded in the simplicity of the land where he was born. This is the paradox of his life, that the world's most recognized spiritual leader began as a farmer's son, and that perhaps it was this simple beginning that made him the icon he became.
Long before the modern world spoke of psychology or personality, Tibetan monks developed one of the most mysterious and sophisticated methods of spiritual succession. The search for a reincarnated Lama, especially the Dalai Lama, was not a mythic ceremony, but a complex, ancient system rooted in intuition, ritual, and deep philosophical belief. It begins with death. When a Dalai Lama passes away, senior monks watch the skies for unusual signs, strange cloud formations, unusual light, or rare weather patterns. These are interpreted as hints toward the direction of the new birth. At the same time, the sacred lake of Lamo Latso becomes the mystical center of the search. Monks meditate by its waters until visions appear, sometimes a house, sometimes a valley, sometimes a single letter pointing to a region of Tibet. These visions are not taken lightly, they serve as a map. Teams of monks then travel across mountains, deserts, and remote villages. They arrive quietly, often disguised, observing children to see if any show an unusual calmness, wisdom, or familiarity with spiritual rituals. They study how a child behaves, how he reacts, what he says without being prompted. But the true test is intimate and extraordinary. The monks present the child with a mixture of objects, some belonging to the previous Dalai Lama, others carefully chosen fakes. Only the true reincarnation will choose correctly. But it isn't just about the objects, it's the way the child touches them, the recognition in the eyes, the instinctive ease that no one can imitate. Sometimes the child calls the monks by the names of their previous lives. Sometimes he knows rooms in the palace he has never seen. Sometimes he simply smiles, as though meeting old friends in new bodies. What makes this process so powerful is not magic, but the depth of tradition. A belief that wisdom continues across lifetimes, that guidance does not end with death, and that leadership is not inherited by blood, only by spirit. This ancient search reveals a remarkable idea, that enlightenment can return again and again, and that a child in a distant village might carry within him the echo of a soul centuries old.
Imagine being a small child lifted from a quiet village and placed into one of the most extraordinary buildings on earth, the Potala Palace. A fortress of red and white stone rising like a mountain above Lhasa. This was the childhood of the 14th Dalai Lama, a boy who went from playing in dusty courtyards to walking marble halls once trodden by centuries of spiritual kings. Inside the palace, everything was vast and silent. The room smelled of incense and old wood. Golden statues watched him from every corner. Monks in deep red robes bowed to him, not because he was a child, but because they believed he carried the soul of a leader reborn. But it wasn't a life of ease, it was a life of preparation. Every morning began at dawn with prayers. As other children learned simple alphabets, he learned ancient scriptures, philosophy, logic, debate, and meditation. His teachers didn't treat him like a young boy, they treated him like a future ruler. He studied the histories of Tibet, the lives of all past Dalai Lamas, and the principles of compassion and non-violence that would define his mission. Yet there were moments of innocence too. He loved mechanical objects, clocks, watches, film projectors. He would take them apart just to see how they worked. He adored children's jokes, animals, and stories. The monks sometimes found him sneaking around the palace, playing harmless pranks, or exploring forbidden rooms like any curious child. But even in these small joys, the pressure never left him. He knew, even as a boy, that he was being shaped for something enormous. While other children wondered what they would become, he was told what he already was, the spiritual and political leader of Tibet, the symbol of a nation's hope. The Potala Palace didn't just house him, it tried to prepare him for a destiny far bigger than childhood. A boy raised among sacred treasures, timeless rituals, and endless expectations. A boy who had to learn how to carry a country on his shoulders long before his feet could even reach the floor when he sat on the throne.
Long before he became a global symbol of peace, the young Dalai Lama was known for something far more surprising. He was a fierce debater, a lover of logic, and a scholar with an almost obsessive hunger for understanding how the mind works. In Tibetan monastic tradition, debate isn't gentle conversation. It's a battlefield of ideas. Monks clap their hands sharply, challenge each other's reasoning, and push arguments to their breaking point. It's fast, loud, and demanding. And the young Dalai Lama loved it. While other children played games, he devoured philosophical texts. He studied Madhyamaka reasoning, Buddhist psychology, metaphysics, and epistemology, the theories of how we know what we know. His teachers quickly saw something unusual. He wasn't just memorizing doctrine, he was questioning it, testing it, stretching it, trying to understand it from the inside out. And he learned fast. Too fast. When senior monks debated him, he responded with sharp wit and disarming clarity. When they challenged his logic, he smiled and flipped their arguments upside down. When he couldn't sleep, he read more. The palace became his university. The monks became his professors. The scriptures became his playground. But his obsession went deeper than intellectual curiosity. He was trying to understand suffering, its cause, its structure, and its antidote. He wanted to know why people suffer and how wisdom can cut through illusion. For him, philosophy was not an abstract exercise. It was a kind of spiritual engineering, a way to dismantle the machinery of fear, anger, and ego. By the time he reached his teens, he had mastered subjects that take ordinary monks decades to learn. His teachers sometimes joked that debating him felt like debating all 13 Dalai Lamas before him at once. This love for logic shaped him for life. It prepared him to face political crises with calm clarity. It taught him to remain compassionate even in exile, and it gave him the tools to speak to scientists, philosophers, and skeptics around the world. Behind his gentle smile was, and still is, a razor-sharp mind trained on the battlefield of ideas.
Hidden behind prayer halls and golden statues, deep within the labyrinths of Tibetan monasteries, there exist rooms few have ever seen, libraries, vaults, and chambers where centuries of spiritual science have been preserved like sacred fire. As a child, recognized as the Dalai Lama, he was not merely brought into a palace, he was initiated into a lineage of guardianship. He was trained to protect knowledge, not political power, not authority, but wisdom. The secret archives, the mind treasuries. Within Tibetan monasteries are collections of texts known as terma, treasures. Some are literal manuscripts hidden centuries ago by masters who believed the world wasn't ready for what they contained. Others are said to be mind treasures, revealed internally to enlightened practitioners when the time is right. The young Dalai Lama was shown these rooms not for curiosity, but for responsibility. He learned ancient medical knowledge, esoteric meditation practices, the physics-like logic of Buddhist cosmology, maps of consciousness used for advanced tantric training. In these rooms, shelves towered with hand-inked manuscripts. Some contained teachings that could only be read after initiation. Others had warnings for the prepared mind only. The chamber of ritual instruments. Another hidden chamber stored objects used in high tantric rituals, vadras, bells, mandalas, and symbolic weapons. To outsiders, they look mysterious, but to monks, they are tools, each representing principles of consciousness.
The Dalai Lama was taught how to use them with precision, not as magic, but as symbolic technology for transforming the mind. The meditation rooms that never see daylight. Deep underground, some monasteries contain windowless rooms used by monks entering multi-year retreats. Silence, darkness, isolation. These are places where the boundaries between thought and awareness dissolve. The Dalai Lama learned the instructions for such practices, the breathing, the visualizations, the methods for watching the mind until it reveals its root. Few ever received this training. He did as a child. Guarding knowledge, not hiding it. Western imagination paints these rooms as mystical vaults of supernatural secrets, but what he was truly being trained to guard was something deeper, the architecture of the human mind. Not spells, not powers, but psychological technologies, centuries ahead of modern science, that map how suffering arises and how it can end. His role was never to keep these secrets locked away, but to ensure they were preserved, understood, and passed on responsibly. The real secret. The most guarded teaching he learned is simple yet world-shattering. Everything you seek, peace, wisdom, liberation, comes from transforming the mind, not the world. The rooms were secret, the texts were ancient, but the truth they carried was universal. He wasn't trained to protect mysterious knowledge. He was trained to protect the flame of awakening so it would never die, even in exile.
When the Chinese army marched toward Tibet in the 1950s, the Dalai Lama was not a seasoned statesman, not an experienced negotiator, not even an adult. He was 15 years old, a boy raised among monks, scriptures, and philosophical debates, suddenly thrust into one of the most complex geopolitical crises of the 20th century. What he faced was not merely an invasion, it was the collision of worlds, an ancient spiritual kingdom, an emerging communist superpower, a child caught between destiny and survival. A leader too early. Traditionally, a Dalai Lama does not assume full political responsibility until adulthood, but as Chinese forces advanced, Tibet needed a leader immediately. He was enthroned prematurely. One day he was studying Madhyamaka philosophy. The next, generals and ministers were bowing before him, asking what Tibet should do as thousands of soldiers crossed the border. Imagine the weight. A teenager forced to make decisions that would shape the fate of a nation. Letters, warnings, and impossible choices. As Beijing's authority tightened, the Dalai Lama received mixed messages. Some Tibetan officials insisted negotiation would save them. Others warned that the Chinese promises were illusions. Villagers begged him to protect their culture and faith. Foreign powers offered sympathy, but no real help. The world watched, but no one intervened. He traveled to China in 1954, met Mao Zedong, listened to political lectures for hours a day. He tried to believe peace was possible, but soon monasteries were destroyed, monks were imprisoned, and the Tibetan way of life began to unravel. A spiritual child in a material war. Raised in a world of prayer wheels and compassion teachings, the Dalai Lama entered a political storm he was never prepared for. His advisors told him, "Stand firm, don't provoke, negotiate, resist." Each suggestion contradicted the next. Each choice risked disaster. He was navigating a battlefield where every move was wrong. The turning point, 1959. When the rumors spread that the Chinese army planned to kidnap or kill him, tens of thousands of Tibetans surrounded his palace, refusing to let him leave unprotected.
That night, disguised as a soldier, the teenage spiritual leader fled through the mountains, walking for days in the freezing dark, under gunfire, guided only by faith and a handful of loyal companions. He crossed into India not as a prince, but as a refugee. The storm that created a global voice. The invasion could have broken him. Instead, it transformed him. The child who once meditated in the quiet of the Potala palace became a symbol of nonviolent resistance, a global advocate for human rights, the world's most famous refugee, a teacher whose message of compassion transcended politics. He lost a country, but found a mission. The lesson within the tragedy. The political storm that surrounded him was brutal, tragic, and often ignored by the world. But the Dalai Lama emerged not as a defeated ruler, but as a leader shaped by suffering. His life became a living answer to one question: how does one respond to violence without becoming violent? The invasion of Tibet forged the voice the world would later recognize. Not a child king, but a master of compassion in the face of catastrophe.
It was a night wrapped in silence, fear, and destiny. March 17, 1959. For days, Lhasa had been trembling, rumors of assassination, soldiers surrounding the palace, and tens of thousands of Tibetans demanding their young leaders stay hidden. The Chinese army grew impatient. Artillery aimed at the city. Tension cracked like ice. Inside the Norbalinka Palace, a 23-year-old Dalai Lama faced the most impossible decision of his life: stay and risk being captured or killed, or flee and abandon his homeland to save its future. The disguise that saved a nation. That night, everything changed. The Dalai Lama removed his golden robes, the symbols of his rank gone. He dressed as an ordinary soldier, a simple jacket, a rifle slung over his shoulder, boots covered in dust. No one outside the palace could know who he was. If even one person recognized him, the entire escape would collapse. Under the cover of darkness and rain, he stepped out the gate. For the first time in his life, the most recognizable man in Tibet walked through his own city unseen, into the Himalayan night. The escape was not a sprint. It was a 300-kilometer odyssey across mountains considered impassable. His small escort included monks, bodyguards, family members, and a handful of trusted officials. They moved silently. No fire, no light, no noise. If the Chinese patrols spotted them, helicopters would be sent. The mission would end instantly. Every night was a battle against nature. Every day the fear of capture hung over them like a shadow. Thunder, snow, and uncertainty. The Himalayas welcomed them with storms. Snow soaked their clothes. Freezing winds cut their faces. The paths were narrow, deadly, carved along cliffs where one wrong step meant falling into nothingness. Food was scarce. So was sleep. The Dalai Lama became sick along the way, but there was no doctor, no rest, only the promise of safety across the border. Guided by faith, protected by prayer. At every stop, Tibetans risked their own lives to shelter him. Hidden camps, secret mountain passes, coded signals, silent prayers whispered to the night. He later said that the escape felt guided, as if the mountains themselves opened a path. The final steps, India.
After nearly 2 weeks of fear, exhaustion, and silence, the group reached the border. On the other side, Indian soldiers waiting, sent by Nehru with confidential instructions. If the Dalai Lama appears, protect him. When the soldiers recognized him, they saluted. For the first time since the journey began, he was safe. He collapsed into relief. The night that stole his home had also saved his life. From refugee to global voice, the Dalai Lama entered India not as a ruler fleeing defeat, but as a symbol of non-violence the world would come to admire. He had disappeared from Tibet, only to reappear on the global stage. The escape across the Himalayas was more than an act of survival. It was the beginning of a new chapter, the birth of a spiritual leader whose message would transcend borders, politics, and centuries. That night, the Dalai Lama didn't just escape. He stepped into history.
Exile is not just losing a homeland. It is waking up every morning with a memory you cannot return to. When the Dalai Lama crossed into India in 1959, he did not arrive as a triumphant leader. He arrived as a refugee, followed by tens of thousands of Tibetans who carried nothing but their faith and their stories. India offered land, safety, and a chance to begin again. But how do you rebuild a nation without land, without power, without an army? The answer? You rebuild its soul. A government in a foreign land. In the small Indian town of Dharamshala, the Dalai Lama established a new headquarters. Not grand palaces, but simple buildings in the mountains. From these quiet rooms, they created a parliament in exile, a constitution, schools, monasteries, cultural centers, all designed to keep Tibet alive, not on maps, but in people. The world had never seen anything like it. A nation whose nation existed only in memory, language, and prayer. Rebuilding a culture almost lost. After the invasion, many ancient monasteries were destroyed, texts burned, monks scattered. Exile became an emergency mission of preservation. The Dalai Lama gathered surviving masters and scholars and asked them to do one thing: save everything you can. And they did. In India, they rebuilt monasteries brick by brick. They recopied ancient scrolls by hand. They trained new monks so that teachings stretching back 1,300 years would not vanish. Tibet was becoming a nation of the mind, a civilization held together by memory, discipline, and hope. The birth of a global movement. The Dalai Lama turned his exile into a platform for peace. He traveled the world not as a political leader, but as a messenger of compassion. His gentle voice carried stories of a land the world had almost forgotten. Universities invited him. Presidents met with him. Millions found comfort in his teachings on kindness and inner freedom. Tibet's identity, once hidden in mountains, became global. The pain that never left. Yet beneath the warmth of his smile was a quiet sorrow. He missed home. He missed the monasteries of Lhasa. He missed the cold wind on the Potala palace steps. He once said, "My body is in India, but my heart remains in Tibet." Exile made him a symbol, but it also made him a man carrying a wound that time could not heal. A nation without a country, but not without a future. Today, Tibetan children born in exile still learn their language, their prayers, their history, their songs. They have never seen their homeland, yet they carry it within them. The Dalai Lama transformed exile into a different kind of home, not built of stone, but of identity. A country can be taken, but a culture, when protected with love and wisdom, can be reborn.
For the Dalai Lama, compassion is not just a feeling, it is a strategy, a discipline, and a philosophy of life. When Tibet was lost, when families were scattered, when his people faced oppression, he could have responded with anger, resentment, or calls for vengeance, but he didn't. Instead, he chose compassion as his weapon. Compassion as strength. Many confuse compassion with weakness, but in the Dalai Lama's teachings, it is the opposite. It requires self-control over instinctive rage. It demands clarity of mind to understand others' suffering. It builds resilience because it frees the heart from bitterness that consumes energy. Anger is reactive. Compassion is creative. It transforms conflict into dialogue, hatred into understanding, and suffering into connection. The science of compassion. He often explains compassion like a mental muscle. When exercised, it strengthens empathy. It reduces fear and aggression. It creates an inner peace that no external force can destroy. In his words, if you want others to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion. It is both moral and practical, spiritual and psychological. Lessons from exile. Living far from Tibet, witnessing the struggles of his people, and navigating global politics could have hardened him. Instead, he used compassion as a guiding principle, negotiating with governments without bitterness, teaching the world about the pain of refugees without blame, engaging in dialogue with adversaries rather than calling for revenge. This is not passive kindness. It is an active force that shapes reality. Compassion versus anger in action. Anger can destroy bridges. It can escalate conflicts. Compassion can create bridges where none exist. For the Dalai Lama, the ultimate truth is anger binds the heart, compassion frees it. He demonstrates this not in abstract philosophy, but in a lifetime of choices, choosing mercy over retaliation, dialogue over confrontation, understanding over resentment. The eternal lesson. The Dalai Lama teaches that true power lies not in domination, but in care. Compassion is not just a moral obligation, it is the most potent force in human life, stronger than any weapon or anger-driven action. Through this philosophy, he shows the world the way to change the world begins not with force, but with a heart that feels for others.
The Dalai Lama is widely known as a spiritual leader, but few realize he is also a bridge between ancient wisdom and modern science. Long before mindfulness became popular in the West, he was deeply curious about how the mind works. He believed that understanding consciousness could help reduce suffering, not just spiritually, but practically. Dialogue with scientists. Starting in the 1980s, he began a series of conversations with neuroscientists, psychologists, and philosophers. These gatherings were called the Mind and Life Dialogues. The goal was radical: to explore the nature of consciousness, to understand how emotions like compassion, anger, and fear affect the brain, to test whether meditation could physically change the mind. He approached these meetings not as a religious figure dictating truth, but as a curious student of science, asking questions, observing evidence, and encouraging open discussion. Meditation and the brain. Through collaboration with researchers, studies revealed something remarkable. Long-term meditation strengthens areas of the brain associated with attention and empathy. Compassion practices reduce stress and increase resilience. The mind can be trained like a muscle, improving emotional balance and cognitive clarity. The Dalai Lama often emphasizes, quote, "If scientific analysis proves something in Buddhism to be wrong, we must accept it." Unquote. This humility sets him apart. He treats science and spirituality as partners, not competitors. Consciousness and ethics. His fascination with neuroscience is not purely academic. He believes understanding the brain can enhance ethics. If we see how actions affect the mind, we can make better moral choices. If compassion can be measured and cultivated, it becomes a practical tool for reducing suffering. Knowledge of consciousness allows humans to harmonize inner life with outer action. Global impact. His work with scientists has influenced psychology, medicine, and education. Mindfulness-based therapies for anxiety and depression. Compassion training programs in schools and hospitals. Cross-cultural studies on the universality of human emotions. By merging Tibetan Buddhism with neuroscience, the Dalai Lama has turned spiritual practice into evidence-based methods for human flourishing. The ultimate vision. For the Dalai Lama, science is not a threat to faith, it is a path to deeper understanding. Through these collaborations, he teaches, the mind is both mysterious and malleable. Wisdom is strengthened when combined with evidence. Consciousness is a frontier where spirituality and science can meet to benefit all humanity. In exploring the brain, he shows the world that enlightenment is not only a spiritual journey, but also a quest to understand what makes us human.
Few realize that the Dalai Lama has taken an active interest in the deepest questions of physics, especially quantum mechanics. For him, understanding the nature of reality is not just scientific, it is deeply philosophical. A curious mind meets the universe. Long before his global fame, the Dalai Lama was fascinated by the relationship between mind and matter. He asked scientists probing the quantum world questions like, does consciousness play a role in reality? How do particles exist as possibilities until observed? Can modern physics inform spiritual insights about emptiness and interdependence? He approaches physics with humility and curiosity, not as a student wanting answers, but as a thinker seeking dialogue. Mind and matter, a Buddhist perspective. In Tibetan Buddhism, all phenomena are seen as interdependent and lacking intrinsic existence. Quantum mechanics, with its strange behaviors, superposition, entanglement, wave-particle duality, resonates with this perspective. The Dalai Lama often reflects, if the physical world shows that things exist only in relation to others, then this aligns with the insight of dependent origination in Buddhism. This does not mean he equates Buddhism with physics, but he sees them as complementary ways to explore reality. Dialogues with scientists. Over decades, he has met with Nobel laureates, quantum theorists, and physicists like David Bohm, discussing the nature of observation and consciousness, the fluidity of reality at the smallest scales, how the universe is less solid than our senses suggest. These discussions are not purely intellectual. They are practical inquiries into human perception, how we construct reality in our minds, and how understanding this can reduce suffering. Practical implications. By exploring quantum mechanics, the Dalai Lama seeks to encourage open-mindedness about what is possible in the universe, show that mind shapes experience, aligning with mindfulness and compassion practices, foster dialogue between science and spirituality for a deeper understanding of existence. He sees these insights as tools to cultivate wisdom. He says, "Science tells us how the world behaves. Meditation and ethics teach us how to live in it." The vision of unity. The Dalai Lama's engagement with quantum physics reflects a broader philosophy. Reality is not fixed, it is relational and dynamic. Mind and matter are intertwined in ways we are only beginning to understand. Spirituality and science are partners in the search for truth. Through these explorations, he demonstrates that the ultimate goal is not mastery over nature, but harmony with the universe and clarity within the mind. In studying the quantum world, the Dalai Lama teaches the world a radical lesson. The universe is stranger than we imagine, and our minds are the key to understanding it.
For the Dalai Lama, compassion is not just about kindness to those we love. It is most powerful when directed toward those we fear, resent, or even hate. He calls this the paradox of compassion. True freedom does not come from anger or revenge, but from embracing even those who oppose us. Why compassion toward enemies matters. Anger and hatred may feel like strength, but they are chains that bind the heart. When we hold resentment, we become prisoners of the past. Hostility consumes mental energy and poisons our own peace. Retaliation often escalates cycles of violence rather than resolving them. Compassion, even for adversaries, breaks these chains. The spiritual principle. The Dalai Lama often teaches that every human being deserves understanding, even when they act destructively. People hurt others out of ignorance, fear, or suffering. Responding with anger only mirrors their darkness. Responding with compassion transforms both the giver and the receiver. He emphasizes, hate is the greatest disease of the mind. Compassion is the medicine. Practical examples from life and history. Throughout his life, the Dalai Lama has faced political oppression and exile, yet he never called for vengeance against those who invaded Tibet. Instead, he focused on dialogue, understanding, and nonviolent resistance. He encouraged his followers to cultivate empathy for all beings, even those who caused suffering. This approach is radical because it requires courage and discipline. Loving enemies is not easy. It is a conscious, deliberate choice. Freedom through compassion. By choosing compassion over hatred, the mind becomes lighter, clearer, and free. You are no longer controlled by resentment or fear. Inner peace grows even amid external chaos. Your actions are guided by wisdom, not reaction. In this way, the Dalai Lama teaches that real strength is moral and spiritual, not physical or coercive. The eternal lesson. Loving enemies is the ultimate test of human freedom. It liberates us from cycles of vengeance. It allows genuine peace to flourish within and between people. It transforms suffering into understanding, anger into insight, and fear into courage. Through this paradox, he shows the world the path to freedom is not power over others, but compassion for all, even those who oppose us.
While the Dalai Lama is often celebrated globally as a symbol of peace, few understand the complexity of the challenges he faced within his own community. His life was not only shaped by external threats, but also by internal extremism and radical factions among Tibetans. The hidden struggle. After the Chinese invasion of Tibet, The Dalai Lama became both a spiritual and political leader in exile. But even among his followers, there were voices advocating violent resistance. Some argued for armed rebellion against Chinese forces. Others promoted rigid nationalism that threatened the inclusive principles of Tibetan Buddhism. Extremist rhetoric risked destabilizing the fragile exile community. The Dalai Lama faced a delicate challenge: how to maintain moral authority while preventing internal violence. A lesson in leadership. He chose nonviolence and compassion, even when it was politically unpopular. He constantly reminded his people that the path of the Buddha is not bloodshed. He negotiated with rebel leaders, emphasizing that violence only perpetuates suffering. He cultivated patience, restraint, and dialogue as tools to guide his community through fear and anger. This struggle shows that true leadership is not just defending against external enemies, but also confronting internal darkness. Moral courage over popularity. The Dalai Lama often explains that following ethics is not always the easiest path. Choosing peace over retaliation can be unpopular or misunderstood. Standing against extremism within one's own group requires courage, foresight, and humility. The goal is not control, but guiding hearts and minds toward wisdom and compassion. He demonstrated that inner enemies, fear, hatred, and radicalism, are often more dangerous than external threats. The strategic approach. Through education, dialogue, and example, he sought to reduce the influence of extremist ideologies, foster a culture of nonviolence rooted in spiritual practice, keep the Tibetan identity alive without resorting to hatred or coercion. This approach has influenced not only Tibetans, but global movements committed to peaceful resistance in the face of oppression. The eternal lesson. The Dalai Lama's handling of internal extremism shows that peace is not just the absence of war, but the presence of ethical discipline, compassion, and self-restraint. True nonviolence requires vigilance inside as well as outside. Leaders must confront the shadows within their own communities. Only by addressing both external and internal threats can a society embody genuine freedom and compassion. Through this struggle, he teaches, peace is not given. It is forged through courage, wisdom, and the unyielding refusal to let hatred govern the heart.
Few people realize that the Dalai Lama's role extends far beyond the spiritual. He has been one of the most influential diplomats of the modern era, navigating the complex intersections of politics, religion, and international relations, all while remaining a monk. From spiritual leader to political figure. After fleeing Tibet in 1959, the Dalai Lama faced an extraordinary challenge, leading a nation in exile without an army or formal state. He needed to preserve Tibetan culture, religion, and identity. He had to negotiate with global powers while avoiding violent confrontation. He became the voice of a displaced people, advocating for rights and recognition on the world stage. Despite his pacifist principles, he quickly mastered the subtle art of diplomacy, balancing moral authority with strategic negotiation. Global engagement. The Dalai Lama has met with presidents and prime ministers of nearly every continent, United Nations representatives and international organizations, leaders of faiths across the world, fostering interreligious dialogue. His approach is unique. He emphasizes mutual respect, dialogue, and ethical responsibility, rather than coercion or political pressure. Nonviolence as policy. Unlike typical diplomats who rely on power, alliances, or threats,
The Dalai Lama's policy is rooted in ethics and compassion. Advocacy for Tibet focuses on human rights, culture, and autonomy, not revenge. He promotes nonviolent resistance as a legitimate political strategy. His leadership demonstrates that moral authority can influence global politics. He famously states, "Nonviolence is not weakness, it is the greatest force at the disposal of humanity." Bridging cultures and ideologies. The Dalai Lama's diplomacy goes beyond politics. He connects Eastern and Western philosophical traditions. He collaborates with scientists, educators, and activists to solve global challenges. He emphasizes shared humanity over ideological divisions. His work proves that a spiritual leader can be a powerful advocate for peace in a fractured world, influencing policies without wielding armies or coercion. The enduring lesson. The Dalai Lama shows that true diplomacy requires courage, patience, and empathy. Negotiation is most effective when grounded in ethical principles. Peace is cultivated through understanding, not force. A single person, guided by wisdom and compassion, can shape global discourse without compromising their moral vision. Through his life, he teaches that politics need not be cynical or violent. It can be a force for moral good and human unity.
One of the most surprising and little-known aspects of the Dalai Lama's life is his contemplation of ending the centuries-old line of reincarnated leaders. For over 600 years, each Dalai Lama has been considered the reincarnation of his predecessor, but the current Dalai Lama has raised profound questions about the tradition itself. A radical proposal. In recent years, the Dalai Lama has publicly suggested that he may choose not to be reborn, ending the institution of the Dalai Lama in its traditional form. The Tibetan people might instead adopt a new form of spiritual leadership, less tied to a single individual. Reincarnation, he notes, is a spiritual concept, not a political obligation, and should serve the welfare of the people rather than tradition alone. This statement has sent ripples through Tibetan society and the global Buddhist community, challenging centuries of unquestioned custom. Why consider ending the line? Several reasons guide his thinking. Preserving Tibetan autonomy. Reincarnation has become politicized, especially by external forces seeking influence over Tibet. Modern relevance. The world has changed. Leadership structures based solely on reincarnation may not best serve the Tibetan people today. Spiritual integrity. He emphasizes that true Dharma leadership is ethical and compassionate, not inherited by birth or ritual. The Dalai Lama insists that the welfare of the people is more important than preserving tradition for tradition's sake. Implications for Tibetan Buddhism. If he ends the line of Dalai Lamas, the Tibetan community may move toward collective or council-based spiritual leadership. Rituals surrounding recognition of future Dalai Lamas could be revised or abandoned. The focus of Tibetan Buddhism might shift from institutional authority to personal practice and ethical responsibility. This would be an unprecedented transformation in the history of one of the world's most recognized religious offices. The global significance. The Dalai Lama's stance invites the world to consider how spiritual traditions can adapt to modern ethical and political realities. The tension between historical continuity and present-day wisdom. The nature of leadership. Is it about the individual or is it about the values and community they serve?
By questioning his own reincarnation, the Dalai Lama demonstrates that spiritual courage includes challenging even the foundations of one's own legacy. The lesson. Ultimately, this debate is not about ego or mortality. It is about compassion, wisdom, and the responsibility of leadership. The Dalai Lama teaches, if continuing the line of Dalai Lamas no longer serves the people, then perhaps it should end, for the Dharma is greater than tradition. It is a bold, contemplative act reminding the world that true leadership is defined by service, not by history or ceremony.
The Dalai Lama is widely known for his emphasis on compassion and peace, but a lesser-known aspect of his teachings is his practical, almost scientific approach to emotional well-being. He views happiness not as a fleeting feeling, but as a skill that can be cultivated through training the mind. Happiness as a skill, not a circumstance. He stresses that external conditions, wealth, status, or material comfort cannot guarantee lasting happiness. True contentment arises from mental discipline, training the mind to respond wisely to events, ethical living, aligning actions with values, compassion, connecting meaningfully with others. Happiness, for him, is an inner state shaped by intention, not by fortune. Emotional training techniques. The Dalai Lama offers practical guidance rooted in Buddhist psychology. Mindful awareness, observing thoughts and emotions without being dominated by them. Compassion exercises, cultivating empathy for friends, strangers, and even perceived enemies. Reflecting on impermanence, understanding that suffering and pleasure are transient. Reducing attachment, letting go of clinging to desires that lead to frustration. Through these methods, he teaches that the mind can be trained like a muscle, leading to resilience, calm, and joy. The neuroscience connection. The Dalai Lama has collaborated extensively with scientists, demonstrating that meditation and emotional training physically alter brain activity, increasing areas associated with empathy and calm. Compassion and altruistic behavior enhance mental well-being, confirming ancient wisdom through modern science. Happiness is both a personal practice and a societal skill, improving relationships and communities. He often says, happiness is not something ready-made, it comes from your own actions. Daily application. He encourages small, consistent practices. Smiling, even during difficulty, to shift mental focus. Reflecting on gratitude daily. Considering others' perspectives before reacting in anger or frustration. By integrating these habits, he demonstrates that emotional intelligence is inseparable from spiritual growth. The eternal lesson. The Dalai Lama's approach shows that happiness is not a luxury, but a cultivated state of mind. It requires discipline, self-awareness, and ethical consideration. Joy is strengthened by connection, compassion, and understanding. Emotional training is a practical tool for human flourishing in an uncertain world. Through his teachings, he reminds us, the goal is not just to feel good, but to train the mind so that goodness becomes natural and happiness a byproduct of wisdom and compassion.
Few people realize that the Dalai Lama, despite being one of the most revered spiritual figures in the world, is also deeply humorous. His laughter and playful approach are not mere quirks, they are an essential part of his teaching and philosophy. Humor as a spiritual tool. The Dalai Lama often uses humor to diffuse tension in serious discussions, teach complex spiritual truths in simple, memorable ways, encourage humility, showing that no one, including himself, is above self-reflection or gentle ridicule. He believes that laughter opens the heart and softens rigid minds, making people more receptive to compassion and wisdom. Examples of his wit. He is known for jokes that are deceptively simple yet profound, making fun of his own monk-like discipline, showing that perfection is less important than effort, playfully pointing out human foibles, highlighting the universal absurdities of ego, pride, and attachment, using humor to bridge cultural and political divides, reminding people that shared laughter is a form of connection. One of his famous lines reflects this philosophy: "If you think you are too small to make a difference, try sleeping with a mosquito." The psychology behind the laughter. His use of humor has deeper effects, reduces stress and promotes mental resilience, encourages perspective, helping people detach from rigid self-concepts, builds trust and approachability, making his teachings more accessible. By laughing with people rather than preaching at them, he embodies the principles of compassion and joy in action. Humor as a lesson of impermanence. Through jokes and lighthearted stories, he reminds us life is temporary and unpredictable, and taking it too seriously leads to suffering. Self-importance is an obstacle to spiritual growth. Compassion and joy often arise when we laugh at ourselves and recognize shared human folly. The eternal insight. The Dalai Lama demonstrates that humor is not trivial, it is a spiritual practice. Humor can heal, teach, and unite. Wisdom is often hidden in simplicity and playfulness. Joy and compassion are inseparable, and sometimes a smile is the greatest teaching of all. He shows the world that enlightenment does not require solemnity. It can thrive in the warmth of laughter.
The Dalai Lama is widely recognized for his teachings on compassion and happiness, but one of the most profound yet less known aspects of his wisdom is his systematic approach to transforming suffering into personal growth and spiritual insight. He calls it, in practical terms, inner engineering, training the mind to respond skillfully to life's inevitable hardships. Understanding suffering. He emphasizes that suffering is universal and unavoidable, but it can be transformed through awareness, recognizing the reality of pain without denial or exaggeration. Acceptance, allowing experiences to be felt fully while maintaining perspective. Reflection, examining the root causes of suffering, often within the mind itself. He teaches that much of human suffering arises not from external events, but from attachment, aversion, and self-centered thinking. Techniques of inner engineering. The Dalai Lama offers concrete practices. Mindful observation, noticing thoughts and emotions without being controlled by them. Compassion meditation, actively sending goodwill to oneself and others, including those who cause pain. Perspective shifting, viewing difficulties as opportunities for growth rather than mere obstacles. Transforming anger, recognizing that anger harms oneself more than others, then consciously replacing it with patience. Gratitude practice, focusing on what is present and positive to counterbalance suffering. Through these techniques, he teaches that suffering can become a teacher rather than a tormentor. Science meets spirituality. The Dalai Lama has collaborated with psychologists and neuroscientists, demonstrating that meditation and mental training can alter brain patterns, reducing stress and promoting resilience. Compassionate thinking activates neural circuits linked to emotional regulation and empathy. Transforming suffering is both a spiritual practice and a measurable mental skill. Daily application. He emphasizes that inner engineering is not theoretical. In everyday life,
We can pause before reacting, observe emotions, and choose compassionate responses. Challenges, setbacks, and losses become tools for deepening empathy and wisdom. Even small, consistent efforts reshape mental habits, leading to lasting peace. The eternal lesson. The Dalai Lama shows that suffering is not merely to be endured. It can be transformed into insight, compassion, and inner freedom. He teaches, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. Through training the mind, we can turn hardship into a path of growth and joy. Inner engineering, in his view, is the ultimate human skill, the ability to convert life's trials into spiritual and emotional strength, creating a resilient and compassionate heart.
While the Dalai Lama is celebrated worldwide for his compassion and wisdom, few truly understand the enormous personal cost of being a living symbol for millions. Behind his serene smile lies a life shaped by exile, responsibility, and profound loneliness. The weight of expectation. From a young age, the Dalai Lama was recognized as the reincarnation of his predecessor, a spiritual and political leader of Tibet. This meant bearing the hopes of a nation under threat, being scrutinized by the world for every word, action, and decision, carrying the dual role of teacher and diplomat, often simultaneously. He often reminds audiences that leadership is not about glory, but about service, yet service at such a scale brings intense personal pressure. Exile and isolation. Since fleeing Tibet in 1959, he has lived far from his homeland. This exile has created a deep yearning for his people and culture, knowing he may never fully return. Loneliness that no global admiration can alleviate. The challenge of guiding a spiritual community spread across the world rather than centralized in Tibet. Despite surrounded by followers and staff, the Dalai Lama experiences a profound inner solitude born from the unique combination of spiritual insight and political responsibility. Living as a symbol. Being a symbol carries its own invisible burden. Every action is interpreted as a statement for Tibetan independence, Buddhist values, or human rights. Personal struggles, doubts, or weaknesses are hidden to maintain the integrity of his public persona. The responsibility of embodying ideals like compassion, peace, and wisdom demands constant self-discipline. He has acknowledged that leaders often suffer silently, carrying the weight of expectations that few can imagine. Resilience through perspective. The Dalai Lama transforms this burden into a source of strength. By seeing himself as a servant rather than a celebrity, he maintains humility. Meditation and spiritual practice help him navigate isolation and pressure. Humor and simplicity allow him to remain human amidst symbolic grandeur. He teaches that true leadership is less about command and more about embodying principles even when it is lonely and exhausting. The eternal insight. The Dalai Lama's life reminds us that public admiration often conceals private struggle. His ability to sustain compassion and joy in the face of enormous responsibility demonstrates leadership is a sacrifice of personal comfort for collective well-being. Loneliness and pressure can coexist with love and service. True influence often comes from quiet endurance and inner strength, not external accolades. In his own words, "My religion is very simple. My religion is kindness. Yet carrying kindness for millions is a weight only the heart can bear." This hidden burden, though invisible to most, is a core part of what makes his life both human and extraordinary.
For the Dalai Lama, compassion is not merely a personal virtue,
It is the cornerstone of humanity's survival and progress. In a world fraught with conflict, inequality, and environmental crises, he teaches that the future of the planet depends on our capacity to care for one another. Compassion as a practical necessity. The Dalai Lama emphasizes that compassion is not sentimental or passive. It is a practical response to suffering, injustice, and global challenges. A tool for social cohesion, reducing hatred, violence, and mistrust. A guide for ethical decision-making, ensuring that progress benefits all beings. He often repeats that without compassion, intelligence and technology alone cannot save us. Interconnectedness of all life. At the heart of his teaching is the idea that every human action ripples through society and the natural world. Exploitation, cruelty, and indifference create cycles of suffering. By cultivating compassion, individuals contribute to collective well-being and harmony. Compassion, for the Dalai Lama, is a practical science of empathy, connecting inner peace with social responsibility. Global relevance. The Dalai Lama applies his vision to the modern world. Political leaders must approach power with care for human dignity. Environmental stewardship is an act of compassion for future generations. Education should cultivate emotional intelligence, not just knowledge and skills. He stresses that technological and economic advances are meaningless if they do not nurture the human heart. Cultivating compassion. He outlines specific ways to develop compassion individually and collectively. Mind training, reflecting on others' suffering, and practicing empathy daily. Ethical action, making choices that prioritize kindness over selfish gain. Dialogue and understanding, engaging with different cultures and beliefs with respect. Through these practices, he believes compassion becomes a habit, a social norm, and ultimately a force that transforms societies. The eternal vision. The Dalai Lama's message is timeless. Humanity's survival is linked to our ability to care for one another. True security is not military or economic. It is emotional and moral. Compassion is both a personal practice and a collective imperative. In his own words, "If you want others to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion." He envisions a world where love, understanding, and shared responsibility guide human action. A future where compassion is not optional, but essential for the very survival of the human family.